mass-produced housing being built for next year's World Fair in Montreal. One answer to the appalling housing problem, an important experiment in how to live.
If we built cars the way we build houses, none of us would be driving because we just couldn't afford it. And in a way, Habitat points out the way to applying these same techniques to housing so that we will have better housing for less cost.
Moser Safdie argues that mass production of houses in the sky is the only way of dealing with the crisis that goes with the doubling of the world population in the next 30 years.
It will be necessary to build as much in the next 15 years as has previously been built during the whole prior history of mankind. And of course we just cannot do this with conventional techniques.
These are the sort of cities mankind has created in his life history. Leeds is typical of Britain's problem in housing. Of its 179,000 houses, 45,000 are back-to-back, half of them still without bathroom or lavatory.
Britain's immediate need is for 4 million new houses. In long term, we need to build a city the size of Leeds every 4 months between now and the year 2000.
To do it, we must adopt new methods, new materials and new designs. New designers are today's architectural students. Here in Leeds, they benefit from other people's mistakes by being taken on a bus ride round the city.
This morning, when you look outside and see it all through the rain, it looks at its very worst. You can see one or two of the monumental buildings, but you can also see the canal, the river, the railway bridges, all the clutter that goes with all these things, and the dirt over everything as well.
To avoid repeating the mistakes, designers must shape whole communities as well as individual buildings.
Now we're getting down into the industrial part of the city, leaving the civic centre, and you can see how quickly the atmosphere changes here. Emerging now from the darkness of the railway arches, if you look out through the window on the right-hand side of the bus, you will see what appears to be the Campanile of Florence Cathedral, which of course was designed by Giotto. That was built in marble, but this is a different version, built in brick, covered with soot now. And the owner of this mill must have been extremely proud, because this, in fact, is the way in which he built the chimney, disguising it as the Campanile.
We're trying to put all the messages that the north, Leeds, Manchester, Salford, all those places, are attractive places to come. Well, these are the type of places that people see first. And if we're interested in our environment, this is the kind of place we should be we should take base our interests on.
I think the trouble is, though, you see, that I've lived here for 20 years and I've grown up in this environment. And one sort of takes all this dirt and grime for granted, you see. You've lived here and this is where you live, this is your home, you see. And I think if you created a new environment where you were trying to create a clean building, you would lose a certain amount of the atmosphere of this place.
The old generation accepts the dirt and the filth, whereas the new generation is going to require some modern developments, and they don't want this.
There is one thing that comes over, and I'm sure we mustn't lose it, and that is that there's a vigour and a vitality about it. You know, there's people working and there's something being done, you know.
It's all right just talking about this so-called attitude of the Northerner. We're accustomed to it, we live with it, and therefore we can stand it. But the point is, how much longer can we stand it? I mean, imagine at the North where we're at, we accept it, we live with it. Well, we can't live with it much longer. I mean, how can you expect a Southerner or someone from the Midlands to come up here and say, right, I might want to live here? Is it possible for me to live here?
What strikes me immediately when you come up into the north, you come through the industrial areas of the Midlands, and you come up into the north up here, and you see the industrial housing at its ultimate. It's row upon row, red brick, terraced housing, most of it back-to-back housing. All things done in brick, red brick, the same thing all the time.
It's madness when you consider the structure and the sanitation and these sort of technological things. This is madness, yes. The appearance is to some extent madness, but it can be greatly improved. But the basic thing is that we should consider, I still think that there is a very strong community feeling in this sort of housing, and it's something you shouldn't arbitrarily destroy.
We must attempt to get into towns the character and the environment of the back-to-back terrace so that local colour and tradition of towns is fostered. The semi kills it. Each town with its sprawl of semis on the outside looks like each other as you approach them. The semi-detached is one of the curses of our modern cities. People crave for individuality in their own little buildings, have their own front garden and their own little back wall. The thing is that densities on semi-detached housing are not high enough to accommodate the cities of the future. They're going to sprawl, eat away the countryside so that we've got nothing left. It becomes one vast meaningless sprawl, rather like Los Angeles. This is what we've got to fight. We must get away from this. We must rethink and say we've got to create a city with its colour and its tradition, its character in a big urban environment. This is what people want, and this is what we must give them. We have to be bold and strong to do this, and so must the authorities, and it must be the authorities that give the lead.
We must preserve the urban quality of cities and retain the excitement which some of the old cities had instead of this mediocre urban sprawl, which is absolutely boring.
If we can get the atmosphere of somewhere like Stockholm, which is beautiful to live in, a place with environment where people enjoy the city, it's alive, if we can get this into our cities, then we're halfway to solving the problem.
I don't think we're thinking of high blocks of flats in the correct manner. We're not going far enough with them.
But I think the ultimate aim must be this sort of city in the air, where everything is contained in this one block. But you get schools and play areas, not just at ground floor level, but at various levels.
The local authority are having enough job housing people, putting a roof over their head, never mind providing what could be good facilities. It's a tremendous problem.
Leeds is coping with the problem better than most. Their method is that which has proved popular for the last 50 years, huge blocks of flats differing only slightly in size and design.
The main argument against this kind of battery living is that it's impersonal. Families moved here meet only in the lift.
Architects feel the answer is streets in the sky, with shops at all levels and a drive-up delivery service even on the 15th floor. But the responsibility for building rests with the local authorities. They're faced with finding practical solutions to a desperate shortage. Alderman Carl Cohen is chairman of the Leeds Housing Committee.
As far as we in Leeds are concerned, we are getting on with the job pretty well. As I have intimated before, we have been very, very progressive in our slum clearance programme. And at the moment, our building programme is at the rate of some 2,300 houses a year. Unfortunately, we can't build any more. From the criticisms that are levelled oftentimes at the work of the Housing Committee, one would imagine that the process that the City Council goes through in electing its Housing Committee is to pick out the 16 biggest dunderheads, and of those 16 they then elect the biggest idiot to be its chairman, which of course is really fantastic. The Leeds Housing Committee, to give it its due, sits and tries to think what will people want in the year 2000 when they're building in the year 1966. That is our difficulty, because we know that what we think and what you think is a luxury today, your successors in the year 2000 will demand as of a necessity.
One move towards the house of the future is through industrialised building. The designer of Britain's most revolutionary scheme is Martin Richardson.
Industrialisation in building is, I think, simply facing the facts of the situation. The fact that housing is a mass need. It's not like building town halls or made-to-measure suits. It is like providing cars or off-the-hook suits. My brief in the Yorkshire Development Group was to design a system of industrialised housing for the four cities which compose it. These are Hull, Leeds, Nottingham and Sheffield. The idea of this system is really very simple indeed. It consists of a family of houses of all sizes, from 1 to 6 persons, which can be built up one above another, like this, in almost any pattern, and which can be built next to each other, like this, again, in almost any pattern. They're all strung together by decks, continuous streets, if you like, at high level. Having got out this idea, this family of dwellings, one has automatically created an extraordinarily simple basis for factory production, because every panel, every floor panel, every panel on the facade is exactly the same width. We have, for example, 40 miles of windows, every one of which is 3 feet wide. We can afford to have them double glazed. The external finish is equal to what one normally sees on expensive office blocks or flats. Finally, and this is the really extraordinary thing, this is very cheap.
Arthur Quarmby, lecturer
Value
at
for
Leeds,
money.
believes housing isn't
In
worth
value
what
for
it
money
costs.
terms, housing is in a ridiculous state. If you think that a cheap car in a brick-built garage, for example, the basic price of the car, that is car less tax, may be less than the price of the brick-built garage. Or another example, you can get a cheap transistor radio for the price of half a square yard of brickwork. Housing is just, it's in an unbelievable state. I think it's a question of production. If you take a simple example, a 10-year-old cheap car, and then compare that car with this year's model of the same car. This year's model is streets ahead of the 10-year-old version, both in economy, performance, and comfort. If you take a 10-year-old house and a house of today, there's no difference, even a 30-year-old house. And this is because we don't get built-in redundancy developing in housing. I think we should be able to produce a 3-bedroom house for a maximum of £1,000 with greatly increased space and with an interior which really functions, which really does things for people. Present-day houses are anti-people, in fact.
Arthur Quarmby believes people will move about more in the future. He's designed a house to move with them, a plastic pod to plug into a permanent tower.
The tower is made out of concrete, and the pods are made out of plastic. This is in order to take advantages of the best qualities of the two materials. Down here we have lavish car parking facilities, also lift motor rooms and air conditioning plant, also some shops. And then there's a ramp here which leads to what is called the pickup platform. The pods are delivered by truck and are picked from the truck by the crane and suspended on the concrete arms. The tip of each scoop is a suspension point upon which these plastic living pods are hung, which have a hook the owner is renting, so to speak. The crane picks up this pod from the truck. Then this arm traverses in and suspends this pod onto the end of the concrete arm. Then the flexible corridor connection here is sucked hydraulically onto the side of the main stem, thus releasing the services. And then above that we have water storage tanks, restaurant, laundry, and more shops. I would never say that people must live in any form of construction at all. This is a big danger in architecture, that architects tend to say, we know how people should live. And they're jolly well going to live as we say they should. I think, though, that architects must offer choice to the public. We should offer these things to people and let them make their own minds up. If they want them, they'll take them. If they don't, they won't. But let's give them the choice.
I don't care what kind of house it is, if you're warm and you're comfortable.
Yes, at a reasonable cost.
Warm, if you're warm and you're comfortable and you've no damp. You sure what would happen about ground rent when you move?
Ground rent in the new block?
Yeah.
No ground rent.
When you pick up your house and walk, as you say,
Yes.
all right.
Oh, wasn't there a
to pay ground rent wherever you go, haven't you? Wherever you.
Stop.
I mean, it'd be like a caravan, wouldn't it?
I think that, in principle, that if we can do better and more comfortable housing at half the cost, even if it does look different.
Oh, I quite agree with you there, yes.
You think it's on?
That's
what
we
want.
Yes.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Oh, yes. Anything that will fetch the cost of living down, definitely.
But people want to live in something that looks like a home. That doesn't look like a home, does
No,
it?
but it might
I was always
inside.
taught that it doesn't matter what it looks like from the outside, it's what you make it inside. A home is what you make it.
It's rather an interesting window, though, in that you can walk out onto it. And you're 500 feet up here in space amongst the clouds and you're out.
I'm sorry, I don't like heights to start off with.
Well, you're not having mad. Whereabouts do you empty your rubbish and
Oh, we've got waste disposal units all built into that.
Yeah.
All built into it. That's all taken care
So
of.
we've no need to go out then? We've no need to go...
No, this is a house that will do things for you.
Yeah.
You know, it's got a properly fitted bathroom, kitchen, properly warm and comfortable, and it's cheap.
looking on a scale model like this.
It is difficult, isn't
It is very difficult to imagine it,
got
because
to
it
have
looks like something out of Doctor Who at the moment.
Got to have a very vivid imagination, haven't you?
Yes. You know, and everything inside, you know, away from everything that's
Well,
human. Besides, what would just live here?
You're a young baby in a pram, and you would stay halfway up. I mean, would you either have to go to the top to take your pram or down to the bottom to take your pram?
Oh, you'd
I mean,
have
you
room
wouldn't be able to stand it outside your door,
No,
would you?
you'd have room to keep it in the flat itself.
Yes, but I
These
mean,
are big.
sometimes, I mean, you want your baby outside, don't you, in the fresh air? I mean,
Yeah,
you
well,
don't want
fresh
them in
air,
all the
yes.
time.
Yes, that's
I
another
mean, it won't
problem.
get
Now, a lot of you look at the sort of bits and pieces that we make, and you say, that's all very well if you're landing on the moon, or that's all very well if you're living in the west coast of America, where technology is really advanced in everyday life. But could it happen here?
So far as students are
We talk a
concerned, the
lot
chief
about the
agent
shorter
of change
working
in
day
Britain
and what
is
that'll
Peter
mean to
Cook.
people,
He leads the protest against
either
convention,
symbolically or
advocating cities for lots of people rather than lots of buildings.
I think that, despite what I've just said, housing is a social need. There's no doubt about the fact that if you take a look around this country, and you take a look at the way most of us have to live, and we're reaching the moon at the same time, it's pretty pathetic. I want to talk about housing from a very personal point of view, because I don't think the term housing should really exist at all. What we're trying to do when we keep ourselves warm, when we keep ourselves amused, when we keep ourselves alive, when we keep ourselves reaching further than we reached yesterday, is not housing, it's living. It may be that by destroying the notion of a house or a city, or even a car for that matter, although cars are currently fashionable and convenient up to a point, it may be necessary to destroy them and say, right, let us go back to what man is trying to do, what man needs to achieve, and then invent the term, call it asparagus if you like, that's necessary to make that thing possible. And this is what we're involved in. This is why some of the things that we do can be called buildings, and sometimes they virtually cannot be called buildings, and it doesn't in a way matter what the hell you call them. I think very strongly that in the last 50 years, people have been given fantastic opportunities to reach further than they ever dreamed. Even ourselves, 5 years ago, we didn't realize that the world we now live in today could be as marvelous and widespread as it now is. What we're very frightened of, in fact, is that if we just go on making do in the way that we do, we will have to become monsters, because the situation will become so chronic. And this is what's happening to housing today. To go on surviving in it, we will become some kind of monster, even if we don't look any different. Now, this idea of the robot we're very interested in, because although it's thought of as a joke, or as a science fiction image, or a gimmick, in fact has a lot to do with the idea of one person or one situation being able to grasp the whole world without effort. The idea, if you like, of a miniature camera and a miniature radio and a miniature television set, a 2-inch television set, which one saw only a few days ago in existence, and a miniature car on the bottom of your foot. It's not only in the value of the things themselves, but in the way in which they can make you not just a satellite of your own home, but in effect a satellite of the whole world.
Each year, 500 students like these become qualified architects. If there is to be a shakeout of old ideas on how people should live, the power to do it is theirs.
What do we think is most important, the fact of limited money, or the fact that people are living in crucially bad conditions in places like Leeds and Liverpool and Manchester? They are so badly off that these people have got a society and an environment which is terrible. This is what is wrong. We've got to say spend more money. We don't just have to accept it and say, all right, there's so much money, we can't do anything. We've got to take these people, we've got to provide something for them. And this is our problem.
People must realise the urgency of the situation. You see places like San Francisco and people that live in some of these Spanish towns. You wonder Will this ever be possible in northern cities?
How should people live? Minute amount is spent on investigating what is the right environment for people. If we can get a really qualified team on this, spending a number of millions of pounds per year investigating it and really finding out about the problems we have to deal with as a profession, how people should live and what they should feel and the environment they live in. And this is something which hasn't been explored by architects. We think we know a few solutions, but do we?
So far, more is being spent on planning cities under the sea than on land. America alone has an underwater budget of $250 million. This is Habitat, the result of a student's thesis, and cost only $15 million. Designer Moser Safdie.
And what Habitat tries to do is, within a high-density, multi-story construction, give families what they look for in a single-family house, like a garden, certain kind of identity, complete privacy, visual and acoustic. The house is entered off a pedestrian street in the air rather than a corridor. I think in a way Habitat is the first or the beginning of a development of the city where instead of subdividing land two-dimensionally and building separate buildings on it, you subdivide urban space three-dimensionally and build in space different things in a three-dimensional pattern instead of a two-dimensional pattern. And that way you're able to have high density without sacrificing the amenities of open space, of park, of sunlight, of view, of all the things we really expect our city to give us.
The way Habitat is put together is unique. All the houses are made in molds on the building site. The plastic bathroom is fitted as one unit. The kitchen too comes in one piece, and they're both assembled on the production line along with all other fittings. At the moment, there are 160 houses. 10,000 of them would make them far cheaper than the modern semi. Each house weighs 90 tons and is hoisted into position. There are no frames, beams or columns because one house supports the other in the overall structure.
The pedestrian streets run continuously across the whole building so that you could walk for 15 minutes down the street in the air without taking the elevators. There'll be small trees and bushes and vines in each and every garden, as we mentioned, automatically irrigated. That would mean that the building itself would be substantially green and the color of plants and flowers as you look at it, similar to an Italian hill town. The whole building is being designed in such a way that you can take your 5-year-old child and let him out of the door on the 10th floor on the pedestrian street and let him go on his own. The railings are high enough and wide enough to prevent climbing. At the same time, they give you privacy because they make it impossible for one neighbor to look down at the neighbor below him. The higher we can build, the more flexibility we have in arranging the elements that make up the city as a whole. I think once we move to metal structures or combination metal-plastic structures, technically we'll be able to build 40 or 50 or 60 stories high. People should be able to move within the city in a dignified atmosphere. Dignified meaning basically not being interrupted by cars and having sun and view and not being blown off by the wind or not being enclosed by smog or pollution or whatever it is.
Habitat is the world's only experiment towards finding new forms of human shelter. Like the Eiffel Tower, it will stand as a permanent reminder of a World Fair. Its advantages are that it's cheap, instant housing, occupying a minimum of land space. No one yet knows if it will work, but experiments like it are vital to any solution of the building famine.